Prime Minister Modi has met with US President Donald Trump, and on this special broadcast, we'll decode what went on inside that meeting and what the Prime Minister is coming back with. How should we look at that meeting? Has it served India's interests? Well, Trump certainly called the Prime Minister terrific, but like is the habit with Trump, the meeting was not without some early shocks. Even before the meeting took place, Trump made an announcement on reciprocal tariffs, which hits countries including India. However, if that was going to cast a long shadow over the meeting, it did not show. I'm Barkha Dutt. You're with the Mojo Story. Today, we'll be taking you deep inside that Trump-Modi meeting to look at the big takeaways from that meeting. The big debate in India has been whether Trump, whatever he may be for his own country, is good for India. And today, Donald Trump, from the podium at a joint press conference with Prime Minister Modi, said that the Biden administration had done a lot of things wrong with India. Prime Minister Modi could be seen smiling on as Donald Trump made those remarks. Whether it is the extradition of the Habur Rana, the 2611 mastermind, or at least one of the two key masterminds, or trade, or tariffs, or terrorism in general, a lot went on in that meeting. The Prime Minister also met with Elon Musk, Tulsi Gabbard, Vivek Ramaswamy, among others. As he's headed back to India, we ask how we decode the Prime Minister's big US trip and that big meeting with Donald Trump. Let's introduce a very distinguished panel today as we try and make sense of all that went on, both on and off camera. Prasad Duvuri, who is, of course, an Indian businessman based out of the United States of America, is with us. Prasad, it's good to see you. Also joining us is communications professional Anang Mittal. It's good to have you back with us, Anang. Joining us is military veteran, strategic affairs analyst, Gen Raj Shukla. Always a pleasure, sir. Sreenivasan, not known to be a Trump fan, but also a diplomat son among his many other avatars. How does he see this meeting? Good to see you, Sree. And finally joining us, it's a great pleasure to have with us Ambassador Arun Singh. He's, of course, a veteran diplomat, has also been India's ambassador to the United States of America, understands a thing or two about those tensions over both the sale of military equipment as well as tariffs. Welcome, everybody, to the program. Let me get the ball rolling by playing out some of the comments made by Donald Trump. I think these couple of minutes really spell out everything that took place in the meeting and everything that was achieved in the meeting. Let's take a look.
In addition, the United States and India will be working together like never before to confront the threat of radical Islamic terrorism, a threat all over the world, actually. Today, I'm pleased to announce that my administration has approved the extradition of one of the plotters and one of the very evil people of the world, and having to do with the horrific 2008 Mumbai terrorist attack, to face justice in India. So he's going to be going back to India to face justice. As we deepen our defense partnership, we'll also strengthen our economic ties and bring greater fairness and reciprocity to our trading relationship. As a signal of good faith, Prime Minister Modi recently announced the reductions to India's unfair, very strong tariffs that limit U.S. access into the Indian market very strongly. And really, it's a big problem, I must say. India imposes a 30 to 40 to 60 and even 70% tariff on so many of the goods, and in some cases far more than that. And as an example, a 70% tariff on U.S. cars going into India, which makes it pretty much impossible to sell those cars. Today, the U.S. trade deficit with India is almost $100 billion. And Prime Minister Modi and I have agreed that we'll begin negotiations to address the long-running disparities that should have been taken care of over the last 4 years, but they didn't do that in the U.S.-India trading relationship, with the goal of signing an agreement. And we want, we want a certain level playing field, which we really think we're entitled to. And he does also, in fairness. So we're going to work on that very hard, and we can make up the difference very easily with the deficit with the sale of oil and gas, LNG, of which we have more than anybody in the world.
All right. So the sale of oil and gas, F-35s, those were two big points from the American perspective. From the Indian perspective, Ambassador Singh, I must start with you. As is typical of Trump, this meeting was preceded by a Trump-style announcement on reciprocal tariffs, and he made the comment about India being one of the countries whose tariffs were too high, even before the Prime Minister had met. Now, I'm imagining that Indian bureaucrats, Indian diplomats would have prepared Modi for what to expect, that the Indians weren't caught off guard. That announcement itself could have created a minor degree of embarrassment in terms of optics, but it's not how it ended. What's your big takeaway from all that has been said and all that we know so far, Ambassador Arun Singh?
So the announcement on reciprocal tariffs was expected, and the US side had been saying for many days that this is the day by which it would be announced. But again, this announcement is on reciprocal tariffs is not India specific. It's a general announcement, and India would also, of course, be impacted. And as you can see, India has been preparing for this because in the budget proposal, there are already proposals for reducing customs duties on many items of export interest to the US. So clearly, that was one signal. Secondly, I think both countries have now found a way so that this announcement of reciprocal tariffs need not be immediately enforced. Because in the joint statement, it has been indicated that now they're going to get into discussions on doing a free trade agreement, and that the first tranche would be completed by the fall of this year. Now, if you're doing that, it means that you will be reducing tariffs on a reciprocal basis on many items of export interest to the US. And India can then argue that because we are doing this free trade agreement with you, we are doing a limited tranche agreement right away, there is no need to enforce the reciprocal tariffs against India. So that argument can be made, and I think US will have to make its assessment of, from their perspective, how much is the progress on the issue. So I think trade issue has been handled, I think, well by both sides. The other challenge, of course, was the issue of immigration, and where there was a little bit of outcry in India about the manner of deportation of some of those who were in the US illegally, not the fact of deportation. And then again, if you saw, India has said, and the Prime Minister also said publicly in his press conference, that India believes that nobody who has migrated illegally has a right to live in that country. So anybody who is a verified Indian national, India would accept. So I think that issue also has been handled. The aspect related to manner of deportation remains to be handled. And I think from India's perspective, the signal has been that the Trump administration attaches value to the India relationship. The Prime Minister of India was among the first leaders to be invited. He was the fourth leader to be invited. And if you look at the breakup, you had the Prime Minister of Israel, then the Prime Minister of Japan, the King of Jordan, and the Prime Minister of India. So the signal from the US is, in terms of their current priorities, it's West Asia, the Middle East, and the Indo-Pacific and the Quad relationship. So I think that's important from the second thing that I think India wanted was some of the technology aspects of the partnership that had taken a leap during the Biden administration. That should be sustained. And again, if you see the joint statement and other comments, that is being taken forward. Now, of course, it has been rebranded because President Trump doesn't want to be seen to be doing anything that was started in the Biden administration. So the major initiative on critical and emerging technologies has been rebranded as Trust, transforming the relationship utilizing strategic technology, which is essentially the same thing. So I think from India's perspective, what they wanted to get out in terms of partnership in critical and emerging technologies, in terms of defense cooperation and handling the irritants of the relationship, they were able to handle.
Before I open this up, Ambassador Arun Singh, another question to you. You spoke about the manner in which Indians were sent back home who had entered the US illegally, and that India has never questioned the fact that they should be sent back. They've broken a law. But the fact that they were shackled, there were testimonies that emerged that, they were shackled and handcuffed for 40 hours, and not even, the handcuffs weren't even taken off for a loo break. Some testimonies suggested that everybody, including women, other than children, were shackled. There are reports that two more aircraft will be heading towards India. Do you believe that at least behind the scenes, the manner of this was raised, or do you think that Trump and the Americans will continue to handcuff and then videograph Indians coming home in this manner?
So I'm sure it would have been raised in some way. And I probably the Trump administration will continue to do what they are doing, because they have to signal domestically that they are taking very tough action on immigration. And that's the same treatment they've done with their other partners. So I think on that, as of now, I don't see any signal of a change in whatever the Trump administration may be doing. Now, of course, Indians have been deported from the US also in the past. But what is different this time is the use of military aircraft. And then, of
Yeah.
course, you treat them in a certain way aboard a military aircraft, it gets a level of attention. But earlier, they used to be in charter flights or civilian flights, the way they were brought. So that change has happened. So given more attention to the issue. But I don't see the Trump administration necessarily changing how they're handling it at the moment.
Well, certain irritants are bound to remain, but let me play out the Prime Minister's coinage of taking a cue from the Trump playbook of acronyms. MAGA now meets MIGGA, which becomes MEGA. I have to say this carefully so that I don't jumble up all those M's and I's and E's. I believe this has gone down quite well in the US press as well. But first, let me play out for you what the Prime Minister said about this partnership, borrowing from the Trump playbook. We're now talking about making India great again. Take a look.
कर सकता है फ्रेंड्स अमेरिका के लोग राष्ट्रपति ट्रंप के मोटो मेक अमेरिका ग्रेट अगेन यानी मागा से परिचित है। भारत के लोग भी विरासत और विकास की पटरी पर विकसित भारत 2047 के दृढ़ संकल्प को लेकर तेज गति शक्ति से विकास की ओर अग्रसर है। अमेरिका की भाषा में कहूं तो विकसित भारत का मतलब मेक इंडिया ग्रेट अगेन यानी मिगा। जब अमेरिका और भारत साथ मिलकर काम करते हैं यानी मागा, मागा प्लस मिगा, तब बन जाता है मेगा पार्टनरशिप फॉर प्रॉस्पेरिटी।
So that particular coinage got praise from CNN, which doesn't routinely praise or even focus on Indian news. And we'll play that clip out later if we have time. Gen Raj Shukla. Mega, MIGGA, in the end, it's all about the money, honey. It's all about trade deals, tariffs, military equipment, F-35s. The White House had previously made it quite clear that they expected India to have a more balanced trade relationship and spoke and urged India to buy more military equipment. Is that a big takeaway for you, the agreement on the F-35s? How do you look at the visit?
So, Barkha, I've been just focusing on the defense strategic military space and whatever I picked up from the media and the joint statements. I would say, let me put it this way, that there is one grim reality and two great opportunities. What is that grim reality? Many times on your show, it's the military component of the power differential with China, which is $450 billion. Since I was last on your show, we had this J-36, that stealth aircraft. And what is significant is this J-36 is going to get rolled out in 2032. The American NJAD in 2037, and a whole lot of other stuff, military, robotics, drone swarms. Mm-hmm. So if the Prime Minister didn't say it overtly, but I think MAGA and MIGGA must come together to strengthen our deterrence with China. That's another way of looking at it. So this grim reality of China and the growing military threat is one issue which has, I think, there are opportunities. And what are the opportunities? Very briefly, there are just two in my view. One is that apart from our steadfast partners, Russia and France, when Europe is fearing being left out in the strategic clutch, in fact, Pete Hexet's statement was precisely that we might still take care of the Russian Navy, but the Russian army in Europe, not the Americans at all. Step up your defense expenditure to 5% of the GDP. USA perhaps, and I'm hopeful, I'm being optimistic, is laying greater store by autonomous strategic partners like India, not out of some favor, but I think because of the strategic realities. And look at this position today. We are no longer a wallflower, we are a geopolitical toast of Russia, France, and the USA. So it's a great opportunity, in my view, to strengthen our deterrence. What is the second opportunity? And the other point is that how it is different from the past. While President Trump may be transactional, his team does seem to be more of doers, action, less on human rights and values. In fact, Hexit yesterday was very clear. He said, we are focusing just on hard power. Now,
Yeah, but the problem is if they're less on human rights and values, when we want to say don't send our guys back in shackles, then they say we don't care.
all that will
Works
happen.
both,
All that will
works both
happen.
ways. Yeah.
All that will happen. Tariffs, but
Yeah.
the goals could be could far exceed all that. I mean, it's what you lay emphasis on. I'm just pointing to the opportunity.
Sure.
So I say it's a glorious opportunity. But what needs to be done now? There is a reality, there is an opportunity, and the third thing is, if you remember at the beginning of the year, the Prime Minister and the Defense Minister spoke of year of defense reforms. None of these things which have been announced by President Trump, and it goes far beyond F-35s, the Javelins and the Strikers. It is about trust, which is using technology to transform the strategic relationship, and the other nitty-gritty which is there. None of this will happen because without concurrent reforms in the MOD. In fact, just 1 minute, Barkha, just 1 minute. Mr. Raja Mohan, in his piece today, has made precisely that point, that unless our sluggish bureaucracy gets into this action, none of this will not convert. So it's a huge opportunity also for our, the traditional problems with our bureaucracy to step up the game. We need, if we have to now implement this, we need less of ITAR and more of ISET, build up on our successes of ISET.
Yeah.
There could be direct technology partnerships between the big tech of the USA and Bangalore. Less of the Delhi bureaucracy. I mean, it has to be an enabler, but it must not be the fulcrum. So many of these things, because I think Trump's team deals in that manner. These are the things, and if you go into the detail, Tulsi Gabbard met the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
Intelligence.
So there's a lot. There's a lot of issues.
Just 30 seconds. Just 30 seconds. If now there is a split between USA and Europe, and I'm not saying it's happening immediately, but if Five Eyes and all declines, I mean, here's an opportunity for India and USA to step up in the intelligence domain. So there are a whole lot of opportunities in the new cracks that we see in the international order because of the personality of Trump. So at the end of the day, there is opportunity. I'm one of those who says Mr. Trump must be taken seriously, but not literally. So a lot of
Well, I get what you're saying, but so far he's kind of done everything he said. So I don't know that there's any reason to not take him.
No, I'll tell you what, when you talk of trust, what is it? It is of transforming the relationship, quantum.
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying, but I'm just saying on that limited point. I mean, I think Trump should be taken at face value. What has he said that he hasn't done so far? Yes, he's taken on this big pronouncement on Gaza, which it doesn't seem very doable to me, but almost everything else so far he has said and done. Before I come back to Ambassador Arun Singh, because I have lots of questions, let's get quick comments in from Sree, Anang, and Prasad. Sree, I'll start with you. You're not a Trump fan, but speaking as somebody who comes from a diplomatic background, who comes originally from this country, there is a sense that the relationship is on a good path, on a steady path, notwithstanding Trump being Trump. And as Ambassador Arun Singh says, the announcement on reciprocal tariffs wasn't targeted at India. India just happens to be one of those countries that gets caught up in that policy. How do you see the visit? And intriguingly, for once, the American media is actually paying attention. Can't hear Sree. Can we unmute Sree? Yes, Sree, you're muted at your end. Just unmute yourself, please.
I think India had a very good day. Prime Minister Modi had a very good day. And what we are used to as Americans watching Trump is foreign leaders manipulating Trump by just praising him nonstop. What we saw this time was praise from Trump to Modi, which Americans are not used to seeing. So that was a big part of what unfurled. And I think that's something to watch. And as you've said, that he's doing sort of everything that he has promised, this whole part about Gaza. And I think India has an important role to play in that. India should be speaking up. India has a long time relationship and investment in the region, and they should be speaking up now to curb America in this crazy idea to evacuate 2 million Gazans and turn it into a resort town, which is what Trump wants to do.
Yeah. You did say that you thought India and Modi had a good day. What felt different? What felt different?
I think it's just watching the way in which these two mega personalities really talking about each other, talking about the potential of India. This is just the way that both of them project strength and project that idea that they are doing the best for their own countries. But in this case, they have that friendship that they had. It's a genuine connection that they've built over the two administrations that Trump has had now. So one is only 3 weeks old, but he had 4 years. And so America totally understands the value of India, and they will do as much as they can, but within the limits of, as we've heard already, the world around economics and tariffs, defense, all of that. So this is overall, as I said, this is something that even the American media, which is, as you said, very skeptical and doesn't even pay attention to India.
Yeah, correct.
This was eye-opening for them as well.
I'm going to play out the CNN clip, but I have to ask you, who's singing beautifully behind you?
I'm sorry, I'm in a hotel in Bali, so there's somebody singing here. I'm sorry about that.
No, don't be sorry. I was like, okay, somebody's very delighted at this Trump-Modi meeting. Now, how did CNN cover it? As Sree said, as somebody who's lived in America, studied journalism in America, one of the things we've always had to contend with is how insular the American media is. And when they're talking about India, they tend to be critical. They see India through a singular lens. It was very, very intriguing to see this particular clip play out on CNN. I'm going to just play this and then come to Anang and Prasad. Take a look.
What stood out to you in this joint press conference?
You know, Isabel, I think we have now seen, first with the Japanese Prime Minister Ishiba's very positive meeting with Trump, and now what apparently is a very positive meeting with Trump and Prime Minister Narendra Modi. This is a masterclass for other leaders around the world to kind of know how they should walk into a negotiation with President Trump to achieve the best possible outcome, given that you have to expect, I mean, for example, Prime Minister Modi here arrived in, he got a great welcome from the Indian diaspora in D.C., but then, as he's on the ground in the United States, President Trump announces reciprocal tariffs, which everyone in India knows could have a massive effect because of how high India's tariffs are. President Trump mentioned 70% on some American cars. They used to be 125% on certain luxury cars over $40,000. So India has actually reduced those tariffs already. Whether Prime Minister Modi knew or was expecting that President Trump would make this reciprocal tariff announcement, which could potentially cause Modi to lose a lot of face if he went back to India without making significant progress. But at the end of this meeting that they had, and the meeting went long, the press conference started late, they announced essentially the best possible outcome, which is that the two sides are going to try to fast-track negotiations on a trade deal. And India is getting some of what it wants, too, like more U.S. investment in nuclear energy in India and also those F-35s that you mentioned earlier. So both of these leaders, President Trump's able to list out all of the things that the United States will gain, and Prime Minister Modi is able to do the same. And that, I keep going back, that, make India great again, MIGGA, and MIGGA plus MAGA equals mega. Clearly, they might have had a PR team to think that up, and that's exactly the kind of clever branding that President Trump certainly loves to hear, Isabel. So the Indians did their homework. They understood the assignment, and Prime Minister leaves looking as good as can be expected.
The Indians did their homework. They came prepared. That's as much an acknowledgement of Prime Minister Modi as it is of Indian diplomats. Ambassador Singh, just before I go to Anang and Prasad, I think I must allow you a 30-seconder there. Quite rare for CNN to say what it did.
Yes, but I think, as you know, especially under Prime Minister Modi, there has been an effort to come out with articulations, slogans that make the point impactfully. And I think clearly this particular formulation hit the nail on the head.
All right, Anang, you've been in communications. What's the big story for you out of this meeting?
Assumption of the relationship that existed before the Biden administration. So I think this is only the beginning of negotiations. This is not the announcement of any. Nothing was signed as such, apart from the nice big coffee table book that President Trump gave to Prime Minister Modi. But other than that, I think this is a start of a beautiful resumption of a beautiful relationship. And I think in the wake of
that sounds almost Casablanca-ish.
Yes, I pretty much am quoting from Casablanca. Yeah, so it's it's one of those things where Europe has been on the outs with Trump. They knew that coming in the moment he won. Canada has been on the outs. So there's many countries that are just not on good relationships with Trump. And I think this meeting has shown that what Trump can do when he feels inclined to be friendly to you, and vice versa. So, Justin Trudeau can come over to Mar-a-Lago. He can fly over any day he wants, but he's not going to get that kind of reception. Even though we're much bigger allies with Canada than we are with India, we're not allies with India. So I think these announcements are just a signal of where the United States foreign policy is going, and it's also an announcement of where India is going as far as Prime Minister Modi's third term, in terms of making sure that the country is set for prosperity in terms of
is this personal rapport? Is this personal rapport, or is it the importance of India, or is it a bit of both?
It's a bit of both because again, Trump has always valued those personal relationships. He always touts his friendship with world leaders. And I think that's important. I think the Europeans sometimes roll their eyes at when Trump says certain things about, oh, I'm friends with Putin, I'm friends with Xi, I'm friends with Modi. But I think that's important. And again, look at President Biden gave a state dinner in 2023, but the level of friendship that we saw today completely outshines the state level visit that happened in 2023. So I think that's very obvious to people on both in India and in America that the friendship here is much bigger, much better than what there was with Biden or with other administrations that that previously were there.
Right. So Prasad, the friendship has to translate into specifics, right? And that will be its benchmark. And right now, as Anang reminds us, it's not that any agreement was signed. It's all about intent. It's all about the beginning. You're somebody who sees life from both sides, right? You're a green card holder living in the United States of America, an Indian living in the US. How did you see the optics, but also the substance?
Well, I think all of us have already commented and we have witnessed the optics ourselves. So rather than focus on the optics, I would talk about the substance. As a businessman who manufactures products in India and exports them into the US and sells them here, tariffs have been a nightmare ever since Trump took office, even before he took office. Tariffs have been a nightmare. And just let me spend a second here explaining the difference between tariffs and taxes. Tariffs it's almost like an extortion, because you have to pay tariffs even before you're able to sell the products. So my products have to enter the US. I have to first pay the tariff. It's a huge impact on my working capital cycles. Whereas taxes are after I sell the product, that's when a tax has to be paid. So it's a huge difference, and exporters into the United States from India have all been worried about tariffs impacting us. And I think the reciprocal tariffs that were announced is a huge relief to everybody in India. So I think we have survived that successfully. And reciprocal tariffs, again, are interesting because if India is going to charge 75% of tariff on American cars coming into India to be sold, then likewise, reciprocity demands America charges 75% on cars made in India being sold in the US, which is not the case for us. So, reciprocal tariffs, if you look at it at the next level of detail, do not impact us as much at all, because a lot of the trade between India and the US is not one-to-one, where we sell them something and they sell the same product back here. So in my opinion, if it is literally taken for what it is, we should be okay, even if that is the case. But in any case, I think the 180-day period for studying reciprocal tariffs and coming out with the actual announcement that Trump made yesterday, that gives relief to all the countries. And also the trade deal discussions between India and the US that's happening might be a way to avoid it altogether, or at least lessen the impact significantly. So I am very pleased with the actual outcome and the impact it has on both the countries.
Okay, let's come back to geopolitics. We spent some time on trade. What's interesting is that Trump was asked about Khalistan. What's also interesting is that there's been an ongoing case in a US court involving Khalistani separatist Gurpatwan Pannu. There is an Indian former official who's been taken into custody. There has been an allegation that somehow there was an Indian hand involved in the attempt to eliminate this Khalistani Gurpatwan Pannu. Trump is asked about Khalistan today, and I want to play that clip out and come back now to geopolitics. Take a look.
The question is about the fact that you've decided to extradite Tahawoor Rana. Thank you so much. India has been waiting to have him back in India to bring him to justice. But there are many other elements in the United States of America, particularly Khalistani separatists who've been working against Indian interests. How is the United States of America going to cooperate on that front with India? There have been allegations that have been leveled against Indian agencies by the Biden administration. Are you going to relook that with Tulsi Gabbard as DNI now?
Well, I don't think India had a very good relationship with the Biden administration. They wouldn't sell them oil and gas, which is rather hard to believe because, it's a good thing to do. And a lot of things happened that weren't very appropriate, I thought, between India and the administration, the Biden administration. But as you said, we're giving a very violent man, it seems to me. I mean, I don't know that he's been convicted yet or will be, but let's assume he's a pretty violent person. We're giving him back to India immediately. And there are more to follow because we have quite a few requests. So we work with India on crime. And we want to make it good for India, and it's very important. So that kind of a relationship is very important to us. Okay?
Very violent man. I'm not sure how much of the intricacies of 2008 Trump knows about, or indeed of David Headley, who I think we're never going to get back, who's the chief mastermind. But let's come back to the geopolitics. Ambassador Arun Singh, Tahawoor Rana's extradition, of course, is a big deal. But my question is somewhat different. General Shukla made the point about, there should be what is it? MIGGA and MAGA need to come together to contain the rise of China. There has been some skepticism, some apprehension that Trump, being Trump, might actually cut a deal with the Chinese. India has begun its own process of rapprochement and back channeling and front channeling with the Chinese. What for you is a red flag speaking geopolitically, right? Like Trump could cut a deal with the Chinese. Then what happens to Quad? Then what happens to the importance of India? Then it's the Indian economy. Then, India has to grow its economy for it to remain sort of have leverage if the countervailing value as a force to counter China goes.
So Barkha, I'll make a couple of points there. So if you see the commentary coming out of the US, in the national security team around President Trump, the national security advisor, the Secretary of State, they are seen as people who are China hawks. In his economic team, Elon Musk, the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, Commerce Secretary designate Howard Lutnick, they're seen as people heavily invested in the China relationship. And so the debate in the Trump team will play out at different stages with different outcomes. President Trump himself has signaled, and people who worked with him earlier also have signaled, that he would be quite happy to do an overall trade agreement with China, because that works for the US, get the Chinese to buy more. If you remember, his former national security advisor, John Bolton, had written that in 2019, in a meeting with Sree, President Trump had said, if you buy more farm produce from the United States, I will ease up the pressure on China. Now, whatever be the immediate sort of articulation related to China, I believe that the essence of an intense technology competition with China has come to stay. Recently, the Chinese AI company DeepSeek when it released its product, the stock market capitalization of the US fell by $1 trillion and of
Correct.
NVIDIA by $600 billion. So the intensity of the competition has come to stay. And if you look at the statement that the Defense Secretary Hegseth made in Europe, where they basically said that they were walking back from their current effort in Ukraine, one of the reasons he cited is that US has to deal with the peer competitor with China in the Indo-Pacific. And that's where it is going to focus. So if the
Yet,
US...
if I may interject, just one curious point in all of this is Elon Musk's known closeness to China, right?
Of course.
So, yeah.
No, I'm factoring that in, and it's part
Yeah.
of the comments that I have that I'm making to you. But so the primacy, the essence of the competition with China will remain, and if the US wants to win that competition with China, their companies have assessed that they need the partnership with India, because India is the only other country with 1.4 billion with very strong tech-skilled human capital. For example, 20% of the global talent in semiconductor design is today based in India. You have 1,700 global capability centers of multinational corporations, most of them American, who are doing cutting-edge R&D and technology development work for the global operations of those companies. So there is certainly the China dimension. But aside from the strategic challenge for the US companies to retain their global lead in innovation, they believe they need the India partnership. So I don't think we have to worry necessarily on how the substance of the US-China relationship will evolve. The competition is there to stay. And for that, the US will want, and as they've signaled during this visit and in the joint statement, they believe that a strong India in its own right will be a natural constraint on an assertive and a unilateralist posture of China. So I think we should look at it in that context.
Gen Raj Shukla, do you agree? Since you believe it's all about the containment of China, Trump is known to be transactional. He has people in his government who are close to the Chinese. I know Ambassador Singh has just made a sort of compelling argument that the relevance of India will remain. However, I keep thinking, what would happen if the two cut a deal? I mean, the Quad, for example, what is the meaning of the Quad then?
So I know before that, just on the geopolitics, just let me make 3 points come to my mind. One is, while I did make a case for opportunity in our relationship with the Trump administration, I'm not for one suggesting that this bonhomie and backslapping is going to lead to outcomes, in a very quick way. In fact, we'll have to play the hardball very well with the USA, just as China does. So if I may just make this point, we are entering a very complicated phase of statecraft and diplomacy between a declining hegemon, or if you don't like the word declining, a threatened hegemon, a rising challenger, and this aspiring Vishwabandhu. And therefore, the way you play your statecraft and all, and this is the point I wish to make now, this is the time to step up your game in national security.
But if you believe that if you believe the Americans are diminishing, you're clearly not buying the MIGGA.
I'm saying they are challenged. They are challenged.
Yes,
I mean, he'll try to do MIGGA, but they are challenged. Nobody has challenged the Americans like the Chinese. So this is that moment. For example, he has shown us the F-35 carrot because we need it greatly. I mean, in our context, without the F-35, we're not penetrating in none of these air defenses around us. But the F-35 is a long way off. So I'm sure he's got the other initiatives that he's announced, Asia, global digital highways in the IOR, reciprocal defense procurements. They haven't been fleshed out. But that will be a test for us, whether for us, while we would like to take technology and all from USA, we will have to give business. And there are many deficiencies in the way Indians act. May I also point out, at the end of the day, he may cut a deal this way, that way, but one thing I'm sure, his aim is to strengthen deterrence in the Indo-Pacific. That's what Elbridge Colby and a lot of people are saying. That may be the reason why Hegseth has said nothing more in Ukraine. So, though not easy to trust Trump, but I think the broader strategic focus of the USA is to strengthen deterrence in the Indo-Pacific so that Taiwan doesn't happen. And maybe one more point. I have been an ambassador. Arun Singh is, of course, an old American hand. But I have been following Steve Bannon, the ideologue of Trump. And we must pay we must pay attention to him. For example, on the H-1B, while Musk says it should be retained, he argues it should not. And the argument that he's giving is very, interesting. He says this myth that has been spread that superior Indian talent is coming to Silicon Valley is not true. It has been done by the corporates to lower the costs. And that part of the MAGA campaign is also going to threaten the Indo-US relationship. So in sum, it is a very complicated phase of geopolitics and statecraft and all that. And I may just make one more point, which I keep making to my MOD friends. So this is the time, for heaven's sake, please step up your game. You can't keep doing the things of the past, IFA and all that. Otherwise, we are not going to deliver on. It's a huge opportunity. It would be such a tragedy if we don't step up.
Right. And Anang, you were saying in the chat that there are reciprocities, some that are visible, some that aren't. So, where are the reciprocities, that the kind of quid pro quos unspoken that you see?
Well, at least on the intelligence side, I think, look, I'm not an intelligence expert, but certainly the intelligence that Canada seemed to be talking about was a lot more campaign rhetoric. It was a lot of propaganda. And whenever it came to the Five Eyes discussion, at least publicly, the US supported Canada, but they demurred on the details of what exactly were they supporting. The US would say, yeah, transnational repression or whatever is bad, and we condemn that. So what is clear is, with the return of Rana to India, the US is making that, reciprocal gesture that, look, we're sending one of yours back in terms of who you want. We would also like to see some action on that. And they have praised the Biden team, and the incoming Trump team have praised the cooperation that they've received on this case, on the Pannu case. And so Mr. Pannu will continue sending his lawsuits or whatever he's doing. It was interesting to see NSA Doval there, since he was apparently named in a lawsuit in New York. But again, he has diplomatic immunity, at least when he comes over with the prime minister. So it's very clear the signals that are being sent, at least on the intelligence front. And yes, Tulsi Gabbard is the new DNI. We may see some action there. They're apparently declassifying the last of the Kennedy files, the MLK files. So we may see some declassification that will help India as well. We may see something on the Bangladesh issue. So I think that's the reciprocity that I want to talk about in those terms. But geopolitically speaking, again, if I can talk about Elon Musk, Elon is on. I wouldn't say I don't know personally that he's on the outs with China, but it certainly seems that he's on the outs with China. BYD is doing much better in terms of the products that they're putting out there. And Tesla sales have gone down in China. So Elon cozying up to Trump is actually him cozying up to somebody that he thinks can benefit him. And he does want to sell cars in India. The Indian middle class wants Tesla cars in India. And so that is the new phase of where the market that, if we want to talk purely transactional, Elon is looking towards India. American firms are looking towards India in terms of being able to get that. Google has a program called the Next Billion Users, and that really just means India. And so that's really what these relationships are going to be about, in terms of lowering the tariffs, having a free trade agreement, having these transactions. Same with the defense agreements. India may not get the F-35 today or tomorrow, but certainly by the end of the decade, it may be a possibility. And that remains to be seen what the actual, on the ground situation in terms of negotiations will be. But I think it's a much bigger possibility now than it was even 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago, when the U.S. establishment thought that India was too close to Russia.
Yeah, I think that's quite lucidly put, Prasad. And what I'm hearing is, before I give Ambassador Arun Singh a quick last word, is the place of the market in this relationship, right? I think more than shared values, and the kind of language we used to hear in the past, it's about the market. And we've got to up our game in terms of being agile, sprightly, doing better economically, cutting the red tape, as General Shukla said. Your last thoughts, Prasad.
Yeah, look, I think if you look at the relationship of the US with India and the relationship of the US with China, all said and done, the US-China relationship is going to be the fight for the US to retain its number one position versus China trying to dismantle the US from that spot and take that spot. That adversarial competitive relationship is always going to be there for the next 15, 20, 30 years. That's how it will play out. Now, in that context, with India, the relationship with the US is very different. India is not a threat to the US. India is a democracy. There are a lot of common things between the US and India which don't exist vis-a-vis US and China. So can you imagine the US actually having a strategic relationship with China in the field of research and development of biotechnology, or next generation weaponry, next generation nuclear technology? No way. It'll never happen. But as far as India is concerned, the US and India have already done that, and I'm sure General Shukla would, be the expert here in shedding more light on that front. But we will continue on that path, and that only brings India and the US closer, almost like the sixth eye or the NATO or whatever you want to, a la that relationship. So I think the prospects of India and the US going together on a commercial plus a strategic relationship is very, very promising if you look at the relationship of the US with China.
Okay, I actually have to close. General Shukla, you have a 30-second, and then Ambassador Singh can have the closing word.
Just one quick point. It's not only going to be a fight to the finish between USA and China, but as much between China and India. I mean, they talk of one tiger on a hill.
That's
so correct. That was the real challenge. And therefore, I mean, Ambassador Singh is the expert, but within the bounds of our strategic autonomy, if we can get as close as possible, it makes sense both for Washington and Delhi.
So I just wanted to say, because NATO was brought up, Ambassador Singh, you know this best of all of us, but I doubt that India is ever going to be anybody's ally. That strategic autonomy is always going to be upheld. But this commerce plus strategy, with commerce playing a huge part, any red flags for you before we let you go? Any sort of tension points that you'd look out for?
So, in fact, what's helping us today with the Trump administration is the fact that we are not an ally. And I think, they've come down heavy on the allies. That's why we should keep that in mind. Second thing I want to draw your attention to is a formulation that is right up there in the joint statement. Compact, catalyzing opportunities through military partnership, accelerated commerce and technology. So this is going to be the defining parameter for the relationship. And as you mentioned, there is an element of transactionalism, looking for market opportunity, but we will also strengthen the strategic partnership. And again, in the various things that are listed out there, there is heavy emphasis, not just on technology, but different aspects of defense cooperation. So I think we should keep that in mind. And in terms of red flag, ultimately, every country takes decision based on its own interest and the assessment of political compulsions of leaders. So despite the bonhomie and positive outcome now, we should be prepared for the fact that President Trump and the US will from time to time take decisions that will not be in our interest. So where there is convergence, we work together. Where they do things which are not in our interest, we have to take other action to protect our interests. And some of our other partnerships, France, Russia, provide us that hedging opportunity. And we have to keep strengthening those.
Absolutely. And I think just to be ironic, I'll end on the famous quote that the Chinese like to say, we live in interesting times. And we certainly are entering an era of very interesting times. We leave it there. Ambassador Singh, Anang, Mittal, General Shukla, Prasad, and earlier to Sree. Thank you. And to our audience, see you soon. Thanks for watching. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Voter Story and support independent, robust journalism.